Jesse Foster welcomes you to Father Nation, where other dads illuminate your path to become a better father. Prepare to enter into the man cave.
And welcome to Father Nation. This is Jesse Foster. And on Father Nation, we talk to dads around the world on how to become a better dad. Father Nation is made possible in part by Al Cole from CBS Radio through the success of his nationally syndicated show, People of Distinction. Al Cole now partners with the iTunes Radio Network, which features many of the greatest CBS radio shows to bring you the powerful Al Cole People of Distinction Broadcasting Network. Among the shows heard on the Al Cole People of Distinction Broadcasting Network is the actress who played the part of Drew Barrymore's mother on Steven Spielberg's E.T., actress Dee Wallace. And I'm thrilled to have a Father Nation airing now on the Live 365 network and the iTunes Radio Network. Today on the show, we have Eric Chester. Now, Eric, he specializes in youth and work. And those two topics go together a lot. He's from Colorado, and he's a leading voice in the dialogue on employee engagement as far as bringing youth into the workplace. He's been speaking on this topic for over 20 years. He's written several books on these topics, and he's appeared on Good Morning America, ABC News, Fox News, CNBC, among others, and also Forbes, USA Today, and the Huffington Post. Eric Chester has 2 children and 2 stepchildren. He's also a grandfather of 6. Eric, it's great to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on Father Nation. And as we begin, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your family, but also what were the steps that led you to becoming involved in engaging the nation's youth with the workplace?
My story is not a complex one. I'm a former high school business teacher and a football, wrestling, and track coach. Taught school for a period of 6 years in Colorado and in Arizona at the high school level. I taught school at a time back in the 80s when there were more teachers than there were positions available. So I used to get bounced around a lot because, as you know, the public school system, when they have declining enrollment at one school, they'll shift the new teachers to a different school. And so I got bounced around a little bit, and I decided after 6 years that I didn't want to keep getting bounced around, so I was going to do something different. I really had a lot of fun working with youth, and I was always told I was a real good youth motivator. So my parents owned a printing shop, and we printed up a flyer that basically said I was a motivational speaker for teenagers, even though I didn't have a speech. But I had a flyer, and I wound up sending it out to high school principals along the Colorado Front Range, and my phone started to ring, and the next thing you know, I was standing in gymnasiums and I was talking to kids. At this time, I was married with 2 young children at home, and so it became my way of earning a living is speaking in high schools. And I used to do 2 to 3 high schools a day, every day, and over a span of almost a dozen years, I was in 1,500 different schools, all throughout the United States, through Canada and Mexico, and doing a lot of large youth events, leadership conferences, whether the focus be on career-oriented stuff for vocational student organizations, career and tech organizations, or the MAD, SAD, Students Against Drunk Driving, Student Council, those kinds of events. So spoke at a lot of schools and interacted with millions of young people. My kids began to grow, and over that time I went through a divorce, a painful divorce with my wife, was single for 3 years, a single dad, and married a wonderful woman who had 2 kids of her own. And so our kids grew up together as preteens and teens, and I learned a lot of lessons, especially because I was on the road a lot, Jesse. You're never a prophet in your own homeland, and so I traveled a lot and tried to be as present as I could. But business takes you away from your kids sometimes, and I was away. I missed some birthday parties and some soccer games and some talent shows and things I wish I hadn't. And the kids grew older, and now we're we come back, we're pretty much a big, very happily engaged family and loving life. Now I work with companies and organizations that employ youth, that are like, most of the burger chains and restaurants and retailers and amusement parks and hotels, but also companies that are in manufacturing and technology and healthcare and the IT space, et cetera, who are really looking to engage young employees. So that's kind of my story, Jesse.
Well, speaking to kids on the topic of work, and not just your own kids, but kids around the nation, and now probably your own grandkids, has speaking to so many gymnasiums of youth on this topic, has it helped you today in talking to your own grandkids about getting employed?
Well, it has. And my grandkids now are very young. They're just toddlers, so we're not quite at the talking about work. But we do talk about chores around the house. And, work isn't something that just happens one day down the line. I mean, work is a necessary evil. Work is something that, and I say it's an evil, it's really not. It's nothing will make you feel more complete, more whole than an honest day's work. It's accomplishment. And we talk about that. We try to integrate and inculcate that core work ethic in our grandkids, as we've tried to instill in our kids as well. So, but yes, to answer your question, I think working with so many youth across the country, and they still do some youth events. Every year I'm the keynote speaker at the National 4-H Conference. I do a number of leadership conferences. So I'm still engaged with young people, and I enjoy that. It's a fascinating part of my job. You get to stay current and see some of the changes that have taken place in schools and, of course, in society and what have you. But yeah, that definitely sharpens the sword and helps me relate better to my own kids. And I think having kids helps me relate to kids I don't have, to understand some of the challenges that they're going through as well.
And I think employers are often very similar to fathers in the fact that as an employer, you want to motivate your employees. You want them to become passionate. You have to sell your employees on what you're doing as a business. As fathers, we often have to get our children to become passionate, trying to have a work ethic at home even. Or maybe we have to sell our children on doing something that they don't want to do. For example, my son, he never wants to go to bed at night. I always have to try and sell him that it's a good thing to go to bed. Let's go to sleep now and make a game of it or something. But as a dad, do you think fatherhood is very similar to being an employer?
Well, I think it is, probably more so in today's world than it's ever been before. It used to be when someone went out and got a job, I mean, the boss said jump and the employee said how high. But there is a new mentality taking place in the workplace. It's not just restricted to young people. I mean, there's a millennial mentality even among older people that says, what's in this for me? And, what am I going to get if I do that for you? And therefore, it takes a lot more parenting on behalf of perhaps an employer to, as you said, connect, to cajole, to motivate, to get people to do what you want them to do. That's a part of being a leader, being a manager. But I think very much I tag on to your statement about being a parent and having to sell your own son on having to go to bed or clean his room or do those things that he doesn't want to do. I think we all do that. I mean, there's, if we could in life just do all the things that we really want to do, we'd probably sit around and play video games and eat ice cream all day. And, at least, we'd be led to be just, people that just look out for our own selfish needs and our own desires. And I think parents and dads have a huge role in teaching their kids that life isn't all fun and games, nor should it be. I mean, I don't think, you're going to be happy or fulfilled or feel proud of yourself if you're not out accomplishing something, if you don't do things that are difficult in your life, and if you don't learn, how to work and how to perform and how to be of value to somebody else.
As dads, I think there's several traits that go hand in hand with being a manager or a leader or an employer. And let me ask you, which do you think are the most important? I'll list several that I think are successful traits of dads that are also important things for an employer. Number one, have a can-do attitude. Number two, focus on the now. Number 3, be motivated. And number 4, be disciplined. Among those, which do you think is probably the most important trait of an employer? And is it, do you think, the most important trait of a father?
Well, boy, I tell you, it's hard because I don't know that you could, adequately describe a good father with just 3 of those 4 traits. I think, it's one of those things that it's not like, well, which trait are we going to have? You need to be all those things, right? A book I wrote called Reviving Work Ethic discusses the 7 core values that every employer wants from a young person. Okay, and it's not just a young person wants from an employee. So I'll say it fast, and then we'll break it down. Every employer, regardless of what industry, what level, what kind of employer you're hiring, don't just think about a kid working in a burger, in a burger joint. We're talking about, I don't care if you're a $500,000 a year engineer working at NASA. It doesn't matter. We want positive, enthusiastic people who show up for work on time and work throughout their entire shift, who are professionals, can separate their personal and professional life, and are professionals in the workplace, who will go above and beyond what we ask them to do, or consistently looking to work or to learn and to grow and to add value. We want people who respect our rules and our culture, aren't going to come in from day one and start, trying to reorganize and redevelop, but are going to take authority and take coaching. We want people who are honest in the workplace, people that we can trust, and people that have a heart to serve, that want to provide value out there. So those things are broken down into 7 core values. Being a positive person, so being positive, reliable, professional, that have initiative, that respect rules and culture, that have integrity, and that have gratitude in their heart. 7 core values. So those things right there kind of emulate what you've just mentioned, Jesse. And every employer wants to hire people and have people work for them that have all 7. I often ask employers, if I could bring you somebody that just had 6 of those things, just 6, but was lagging in the 7th, what would it be that would be okay to not come into the workplace if they came in and didn't have a positive attitude, or they didn't dress appropriately, or they weren't on time, or they didn't have integrity, or they didn't do what you tell them to do, or they only tried to do the minimum daily requirement, or they weren't grateful for the paycheck that they got and the work that they did, and they weren't there to serve? Of course not. We want all of those things. What's the most important? I don't know. I don't know that there is a most important. Now, those are also the traits that we want in the people that we surround ourselves with, Jesse. And I'm sure kids want those in their parents and need them in their parents. To be a good dad, you have to be a positive, enthusiastic person who's present, who is there, right? That's the reliable part. Who's a professional. In other words, I'm not just going to be your buddy. I'm not just going to be your, hey, pull my finger, let's go fishing. But I'm going to be a professional. I'm going to do what I have to do, even those times I don't want to do it, because that's what I'm called to do. And yes, I'm going to go above and beyond. I'm going to continually try to find ways to become better at what it is that I do. I'm going to learn from other fathers. I'm going to learn as much as I can. I'm going to learn my lessons. Yeah, I want respect from you, but I'm going to give you respect as an individual as well. You want to look at integrity. That's how important is that, to be a person who that does what you say and says what you're going to do. A person of honor, integrity, and somebody that really enjoys this parenting adventure, that has the gratitude in their heart, that is a gracious individual that is there to serve. Yes, a father needs to be all of those things, and those are the things that the soft skills that we want to develop in our kids, so that they have a fighting chance to succeed when they leave.
It's very true. I think that it's not just having one trait but not another trait, because if it's an important trait to have, you need them all. And if you have a can-do attitude but you're not disciplined, well, that's a problem, right?
Right.
Well, you're listening today to Eric Chester on Father Nation. His website, if you want to check it out, is ericchester.com. And Eric, here's a quote, and tell me what you think about this. If you have a strong enough why, the hows will take care of themselves.
I would agree with you. I don't know, you can give somebody the reason to do it, but if you don't show them how, and a father has to be a great teacher. You know that as well as I do, Jesse. I mean, I had a great father who was a great teacher, who didn't just say, hey, I need you to go out and, mow the lawn. He also gave me the how, the instruction behind it. But he wouldn't just tell me what to do without telling me why it was important, because that brought the relevance in. So one of the books I wrote back in 2002 was about Generation Y, and I spelled it WHY. It was called Employing Generation Y. It was a business book for business leaders saying, it's 228 pages, and it basically said this new emerging mindset, this new workforce isn't going to do the what without first knowing the why. So I don't think you can separate those two things and say, well, just give them the why, but then you don't have to give them the how. And I don't think you can give them the how without giving them the why. It's both. This is what I need you to do. This is why it needs to be done. Now let me show you the best way I know to get this done. And if I can't show you, I'm going to at least provide a teacher, a coach, a mentor, somebody that can help you learn it. That doesn't mean everything. Some things you need to learn on your own through trial and error. But many of those things you do need help with. And that's my job, is to make sure that your life is salted, the path ahead, that trail is salted with great mentors, coaches, leaders, and people who are going to show you what you need to do to succeed.
Yes, oftentimes in life, not either or, but both and. And Eric, now turning the corner here, as a dad, what is one mistake that you have made in the past, but also something that you've learned from it?
Oh, Jesse, I've made more mistakes than you can humanly imagine. I hear these people say, I have no regrets in life. And I go, how can you go through life with no regrets? That's crazy. I've got a billion regrets. And a regret to me is just something I did, and I wish I would have done it a different way. That's a learning point for me. So it's not I'm living in the martyr zone. I'm just living here going, geez, I made a mistake. I learned from it. I wish I would have done it differently. And there's a number of mistakes that you have, that a dad makes with their kids along the path. Whether you were too strict when you shouldn't have been, or you were too relentless on a goal, or I think if I look back, because I'm a speaker, I mean, that's what I do for a living. I give presentations. Because I'm a speaker, I think too many times I turned into speaker mode, which meant I didn't turn it off. I was animated. I got up and I gave a speech instead of realizing that I had two ears and one mouth, and I should have used them in that proportion. Rather than trying to, I knew the answer to the question and I just told them the answer and gave them a long-winded story on why they should have done things my way. Instead of saying, hey, what do you think here? What do you think the best solution is? That may work. Let's give it a try. And getting out of the way and letting some of the consequences teach them the lesson, as opposed to always thinking that I should have been the guy that told them, hey, don't do this and don't do that, and you should do this and you shouldn't, and let me give you a story. And so those are my mistakes.
As far as igniting passion in children, and you talked about, I'm sure, in one of your books about igniting passion in your employees without burning them out. And as fathers, it's so easy to try and burn your kids out by being either too strict or, like you were speaking about there. How do you, as a father, any steps you take to avoid being too hard on your children, just as an employer might be too hard on their employees? How do you balance that?
Well, I don't know. That's an eternal question. You don't know when you're too hard and when you're too soft. I mean, it's life is a cruel teacher because it gives us our test first and our lesson later, and we don't know. There is no hard and fast rule like you're being too hard when, you're being too soft when. It's asking yourself the question, separating yourself from the question, getting away from time to time, and then asking yourself, how did I handle that? How well did it go over? Talking to a spouse or a significant other, getting advice from other parents, other dads. I regularly meet with other guys and say, this is an issue I'm having with my kid. Here's how I'm handling it. What do you think? And they're people I respect, and they'll respect enough that they're going to tell me the truth. They're not going to just tell me what I need to hear. So I don't know when for sure. If you are constantly evaluating and going, what's going on here, what's working, what's not working, and your kids will get to a standpoint sometime and you can ask for some of that feedback. like, what do you think? How do you think I handled that right there? It doesn't mean you have to say, wow, you punished me too hard, Dad. Okay, then I won't punish you anymore. But you listen to them and you go, well, I appreciate you sharing with me. I'll think about it. And that, I think, is the most significant gift that a dad can have, is the ability to push the pause button. The pause button to get away from a situation, to, let the anger subside, if that's what it is, the emotion subside, to where you can objectively think about what you're going to do. One of the best parenting techniques that you can have is just pause. Instead of just saying, oh, you upset me, so here's your punishment. Or just being able to go, look, I don't like what just happened here. It really upsets me. And there's going to be a consequence in place. I don't know what that is going to be. But I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to get back to you. Try not to worry. I mean, that is a very effective technique. And why is it a technique? Because number one, you've caught them, you've told them what's going to happen, and you've said, you've given yourself some time to sit back and to evaluate. By the same token, they're going to punish themselves wondering, what's my consequence going to be? I don't know. But if you punish in anger, if you're trying to correct a situation and you're real angry and you're dealing with it right there on that spot, odds are you're going to be irrational. You're going to make a mistake and that you wish you didn't make, because you're caught up in the moment, instead of just stopping the behavior, correcting them and saying, this is something we're going to deal with. I don't like it. It's going to, there's something that's going to come down here, and whatever that is, you give it a little bit of time.
This is Jesse Foster. You are listening to Father Nation with Eric Chester today. He's with ericchester.com, where he's a leading voice on employee engagement and building a world-class workplace culture. Eric, what is one piece of advice over the years that made you a better father?
I think I'm going to go back to what we were just talking about here, Jesse, because I think pausing is so critical. There's a formula that I share in my books with managers in terms of handling conflict. Any father can deal with the joyful times. I mean, your kid gets the part in the play, or hits the home run, or asks the girl to prom and she says yes, and we can all deal with those celebratory moments when they're really shining bright. But the problem is when your kid stubs his toe, when they make a mistake, when they break your heart, when they make a really bad decision. What do we do? How are we supposed to deal with that? You got a young kid, and he says he didn't chop down the cherry tree. You're dealing with somebody that's lying to you, or is being deceitful, or hitting their sister, or talking out of turn, or not, or being disruptive in class. It's like, how do I handle those situations? So the formula I came up with was simply called OFTDN, open the front door now. I'll say it again, open the front door now, OTFDN. Open is, the O stands for observe. So you is an attack word. If you're my son, Jesse, and I look at you and go, you're lying to me, the first thing you want to do is defend yourself. I am not. Or, well, you lie to me too. It's the first thing you want to do is get that away from you, so you tend to defend yourself. So rather than using an attack word like you did this or you did that, you can just turn around and say, I noticed, the lawn wasn't cut, and you told me it would be cut on Tuesday. Here it is Wednesday and it's not cut. Just want to get your thoughts on that, which is the T, right? Open the T. What are your thoughts? Giving the child a chance to explain themselves before coming at them in anger. Well, here's what you should have done. You should never have done that. And I'm really ticked at you, and go to your room, and you're grounded for a month. And boy, when I was your age, and all those other things that you want to do. Just, hey, I observed this happen and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Because half the time they'll incriminate themselves, they'll own up to it, they'll tell you what's going on, and you can solve the situation right there. But then you get into the rest of the formula, which is feedback, which is now they've told you what they've expressed themselves, and you let them express themselves and get out their thoughts and everything. Then you give them feedback. Well, when you don't cut the lawn, or when you lie to me, or when you hit your sister, this is what takes place, right? There's the feedback. Then you give them the desire, which is the D, open the front door now. D, desire, which is when you share to them, like, look, I don't ever want you to hit your sister. I don't care what she does.
Hitting is not acceptable in this house. It's not going to be done. Or a lie. When you lie, you're bursting the bubble of trust I need to have in you, and it makes me doubt everything else you say. So you give them the desire. There will be no more lies. And then not every time, but sometimes you have to give them the now, which is the last part, which is the next time. Next time this happens. This is when you think out a consequence, right? And now you can give them a consequence on the spot if there needs to be a consequence put in play. But if you're correcting that behavior and you say, hey, next time this is going to happen. It's not me versus you. Next time you lie to me, I'm going to ground you for 30 days. But rather, next time a lie is told, here's what is going to happen. These are the then you put yourself on their side. Hey, me and you are on the same side. I want you to win. It's not me versus you. I want you to win. But if you can't abide by these rules, there are certain consequences, and I'm going to have to make sure those consequences are followed out. I'm not doing this to you. You're doing this to you. I'm the person that's putting this in play. Open the front door now. Observe, feedback, or thoughts, feedback, desire, next time.
Open the front door now. I think that's great advice for fathers to take. I think it will help stop you from disciplining in anger and also help actually change the child rather than getting them to just react to you. Eric, do you have any quote on fatherhood, either your own quote or maybe someone else's quote?
I think the best fathers are grandfathers. I don't know why I say that, but I look now being a grandfather with young kids. It's a do-over. It's a mulligan. It's a chance to come back and to see that, drawing on your wall with a crayon isn't a capital offense. It is something that can be dealt with, and you just tend to breathe a little bit easier. You tend to see things in a different light. You tend to realize not everything is a crisis, and that this too will pass. You think better. You're in a frame of mind. So when I say fathers, the best father in the world is a grandfather, what that means is experience gives us the lessons that we need. And I really believe that there's no perfect father. There's no perfect guy that's out there who's like, oh, they're the greatest father in the world. Yeah, but guess what? He doesn't think so. He's sitting back going, I should never have said that. I shouldn't have done that. This is what I should have done in that situation. I want to handle it better the next time. I mean, this is one of the titles that you have in life as a dad, that you're not going to get right every time. You're going to make mistakes, and you've got to let yourself breathe. But you got to be hard enough on yourself that says, I'm going to make some differences. I'm going to make some choices. I'm going to listen to people around me, and I'm going to get better. I want to be better at this tomorrow than I am today.
Do you have one resource that has helped you with your kids over the years, whether it's a book or a family member or something else?
For me, it's the Bible. I mean, I subscribe to the Bible. I mean, I think there has to be, people need to be rooted in some degree of faith and realize that there's a higher power. For me, like I said, that's the Bible. But regardless of what your faith is, realizing that this didn't just happen by accident. Our kids are miracles in our lives, and there are rules. There's wise people who've shared with us experiences that we can learn from. We can learn as much from people who've messed up what not to do as people who've shared what to do, and just being as observant as you possibly can. I'll share one other thing. This probably goes back. I heard this long after my kids left my house from a good buddy of mine who happens to be a speaker. He said when he was younger, he took the TV out of his house and he took the radio out of his car. He said that silence created a vacuum. And every time that he was around his kids, he wanted to hear their voices, not the voice of the newscaster, the sportscaster, or the actor on television. He wanted to hear their voices. So he took the television out of his house, he took the radio out, and he said, yeah, there were some consequences. I didn't get to watch as many ball games and listen to as many, the music, but that silence helped me understand my kids to a great degree. Well, I have a rule now. When my kids are in the car, we turn off the radio.
I take my granddaughter to work at least, or to school at least once a week. My granddaughter, who's 7 years of age, and she's two, and she spends a night with us on Sunday night, and I take her to school with me on Mondays, as I did today. It's about a 20-minute ride to school. I turn off the radio, that's all silence, and it's amazing what you learn in the quiet places, because they want to fill that vacuum with noise, and hearing their voices and what they think just gives you amazing opportunities to peer into their world, to help them with things that they're struggling with, to provide the hope, the optimism, to share stories and to connect with them.
Yeah, many dads might complain they don't have enough time with their children, but sometimes you have more time than you think, especially if you're driving with them, and you could take advantage of that time by actually spending it with them rather than with a talk show.
Well, time is we all have the same amount of time. We haven't got less time now than our dads had, or their dads had, or their dads' dads had. We have the same amount of time. There's 60 minutes in an hour and 24 hours in a day. It's just, how do we choose to use that time? Do we prioritize other things more important? Is it more important for you to connect with somebody on a text message or on your smartphone, or to have a conversation with your kid? Is it more important to you to listen to the top 40 or your sports scores or something, be in a conversation with a coworker, than it is to turn all those distractions off and actually interface with your kid? We have time. The question is, how are we using our time?
Eric, what is one final takeaway you would like to give Father Nation from this episode?
I just want to give a shout out to the dads out there and say, if you're listening to this, there's a reason you're listening to this. You want to be a better dad. And you know what? My hat's off to you. If you're listening to this, it's because you want to be a better dad. You want to be a better father. You want to learn. And I celebrate that. The people that need to hear this podcast, Jesse, are the people who aren't going to listen, right? Why? Because they're biological dads, and they're not present in their kids' lives, or they don't take the time to want to get better. So I just want to celebrate the men and any women that are listening to this who are parents, and say, look, if you're struggling with your kids, I've struggled with mine. Here, I'm called a parenting expert. I've given I don't know how many parenting seminars and programs and spoke around the world, and my most painful moments in life were where I've come home and come to grips with the fact that I screwed up as a dad. And that hurts. Your kids are your greatest sense of joy, and they're your greatest sense of pain when you've made a mistake. That's okay. Feel the pain. Live through it. Understand that you're trying to get better at what you do. Give yourself a pat on the back, and then commit yourself to being better today than you were yesterday, and saying, I'm going to get better at this tomorrow. So that's my final words of wisdom. Don't stop learning. Don't stop reading books. Don't stop, celebrating the fact that, hey, being a great dad is a journey. It's not a destination.
That's a very true quote there. Being a dad is a journey. And dads out there, remember, if you don't have a trait in you, it's difficult to give that trait to your kid. So if you want to have your kid have a can-do attitude, if you want your kid to be disciplined, you yourself need to have those traits if you want to teach those kids those things. Eric Chester was on the show today on Father Nation. He's with ericchester.com, and he's a leading voice and trusted source on employee engagement and building a world-class workplace and culture. Again, this is Father Nation, where we interview various dads around the nation about how to be a better dad. And Father Nation, again, is possible today in part by Al Cole from CBS Radio through the success of his nationally syndicated show, People of Distinction. Among the shows heard on the People of Distinction Broadcasting Network is with the actress who played the part of Drew Barrymore's mother on Steven Spielberg's E.T., actress Dee Wallace. Father Nation is now found on the iTunes Radio Network, which is exclusive territory. Eric, thank you for coming on Father Nation today.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. I really enjoyed this.
Father Nation is brought to you today by the YoungDrivenFatherGuide.com. If you're a father that just needs a little more organization in your life, a little more structure, go to the YoungDrivenFatherGuide.com. Again, the YoungDrivenFatherGuide.com. Mention Father Nation and get 10% off.